In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of Lessons from My Mother. I've been away for 2 odd weeks because I've been incredibly busy with some doctoral work. The big comprehensive exam has been completed, the oral has been done, so all the requirements of the North American doctorate are being slowly and steadily ticked off. Now the summer is all about research, about Lachine, about French, about travel. So that's what the summer is all about. I'm wearing these as always because there's glare coming into my eyes, but eventually, once my eyes settle in, I will take them off. So today's session, should I take them off now? Ooh, I suppose mm, I'll continue. Today's session is lesson number 42. I'm almost halfway through, and what I'm going to start doing now is littering it with some lessons from my friends' mothers. So I have some friends across the world, some in Dubai, some in Pakistan, some in North America, some in England, who have fantastic things to share from their mothers, and of varying ages, I'd say, and maybe some in Montreal as well, who can share wonderful lessons that they've learned. Um, so I'll be covering that because I want to do 100 episodes of this, and then this is completed and it's turned into my first non-fiction book. So I actually want to do that. So today's lesson is about hard work. Hard work is smart work. Now, I have a problem with the English language, and I believe I'm in the right place to have this problem because A, I've spoken the language for 35 odd years, or at least 33. Um, I've grown up in the center of English, which is England. Um, I've been exposed to varying dialects and accents and deliveries, and I went to Oxford, which is the center of education in England, if not the world, one of the oldest centers. Um, and I've also lived in America, and I now live in Canada. And I'm also from a post colonial country, so we've been engaged with the English language for a long, long time. But when you're from a post colonial country, it typically means you speak the language of your colonizers, but also your own language. So if you go to Morocco, or if you go to Tunisia, they speak Arabic or Tunisian version of Arabic, a dialect, but they also speak French. And because the world is English, a lot of the world is Anglophone, they also speak English. And the same applies to Lebanon. In Lebanon, you speak Lebanese Arabic, or they have certain regional dialects as well. You speak English, but you also speak French because the language of the colonizer. So in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, maybe even Sri Lanka, you'll see a lot of people who are proficient in the English language, much more so than my friends in England. A lot of my friends in England wouldn't understand grammar, they wouldn't understand a lot of vocabulary. A lot of them, many would, but a lot of them wouldn't know why something is a certain way. So as what's a citizen, as somebody born in a post-colonial country, raised in the colonizer, um, studying in the center of the colonizer, and then living for long periods of time in two of the best flourishing colonies, which is the United States and Canada, which are British colonies at the end of the day. Canada still serves the crown. Gives me a sufficient understanding of the English language, and therefore, to bring this long story back to the center, I have a problem with the English language. You people, whoever is doing this, whoever is orchestrating the language, it tends to happen more in the United States than in England, but you create new words all the time. Some of them have a scientific basis, but more often than not, they're pop culture-y. I just created a word, or maybe I copied somebody who said, it's a bit pop culture-y. It doesn't mean anything. But you add a Y to something and you make it into an adjective. It's very pop culture-y. Is that an adjective? Yeah, it's an adjective. So there's a loose understanding of the English language and they play around with it. So recently I came across the term of quiet quitting. Quiet quitting means that you do only as much as is defined in your job description. You never go beyond, you never take on tasks for your boss or for your colleagues or for anybody else. Quiet quitting. Now that's a term. I don't know why it's quiet. I don't know why it's quitting. But they would rationalize it in a certain manner. You can see the same with so many terms. I'm not even going to open the gender box with regards to what discussions are taking place in the US, Canada, England, Australia, and Northern Europe. And invariably, they trickle down into other parts of the world because America controls a large portion of the world's media. So whatever is taking place there ends up in different parts of the world. I'm not even opening the gender box because that's a whole other discussion. But there's so many terms that people create, and I seem to have a problem with that because I've studied English classically. First, as an outsider or somebody from an oppressed majority of a post-colonial country. So we've always seen English as the other, and then we've learned it, and then we've gained mastery over it. You can pick any debater from LUMS in Lahore or any from Xavier's College in India, or IIT or IIM, and you'd see we can destroy the best of the Oxford Union or the Parliament in our debates. You'd see it because we're so attuned to the language and we have the outsider's perspective because we're in it, but we also speak other languages, so we can break it and twist it around all the time. So smart work is a term akin to that. And I have a problem with it because for the past 10 years or so, there's a quotation floating around saying, smart work, not hard work. Work smart, not hard. And it basically means the amount of energy you're putting in completing a certain task. If you'd rather put that energy in figuring out ways to improve the operational process, you'd be better off. And it sounds great on paper. They gave the example of the wheelbarrow, that first man had to push a stone, then man created the wheelbarrow. Fair enough. But try to do that iteratively. That's the lesson my mum used to teach us. Because we didn't have these terms when we were younger. But she'd say the same. Oh, so you don't want to write your homework by hand, you just want to photocopy your papers. Believe me, I had that idea once. Oh, well, I don't have to repeat the same thing, I can just photocopy it. Because at 10, you think, oh, that's a brilliant idea. And she said, all right, sure, let's photocopy it. Then what happens? How many papers will you be photocopying? Eventually, you'll have to write something new. Isn't that hard work? So rather than finding shortcuts to the hard work, why not elevate yourself to get used to the work? And at that time, and even to people who are proponents of smart work, this would seem like, oh, yeah, but that's a given. No, it isn't. Because a lot of people today, if you're hiring from millennials and Gen Zs, they'd be giving you the same defense. I've seen it. I've seen it on hiring committees. I've seen it in students. I don't want to work this hard. I'd rather just do this. Well, no. The rather isn't in your hand. You're providing a service. In return, I'm giving you money for it. You have to add value. Can't add value just on rather, or just on how you feel. You have to add value. And a lot of value is added by millions and millions of hours spent pushing your nose against the grindstone. The myth of Sisyphus is the myth of hard work, except that is an incomplete myth. Eventually you get to the top of the mountain and you can lift the stone like Atlas. Sorry, pardon my Greek mythological interest. But that's the actual story. And for people to say, well, I work smart, I don't work hard. What does that mean? Well, I only work 2 hours a day. I've automated all my systems. All right, let's play that out iteratively. Can everybody do that? If everyone can do that, why don't we have structures in place which allow everyone to do that? So everyone can't do that, or the structures cannot be developed for everyone to do that. You see these discussions happening in Scandinavia. The 4-day work week. Oh, I think it's an abomination. I think I was watching something by Trevor Noah, the South African comedian who also used to run a talk show, and he said the weekend should be 4 hours, 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or something, and the work week has to be 3 days. That's great. As a comedian, as a presenter, as somebody whose job is just to make people think and not affect policy, great, Trevor. Good on you for coming up with something incredibly funny, intelligent. Well done. And at the same time, you see China has the 996 model, which in policy or in business we see and we say, how do we find people to fight against that? Because they have the machinery and they have this dedicated work ethic, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. So they work 72 hours a week on average. Some people work 16 hours a day, which is at least 80 if you work Saturdays or Sundays. It's over 100 hours a week people are working. And the remaining, let's say you work 100 hours a week and 68 hours a week you sleep. So yeah, it's just around. It's very difficult to tie that all in. And then India is the same. They're developing technologies, but they're working non-stop and they're catering to markets all across the world. And there's a billion in China and there's a billion in India. And because Pakistan is closely related to China in terms of alliances and it's related to India in terms of cultural affiliation, Pakistan is following that model and Bangladesh is following. So you have nearly 3 billion people who are saying, no, we're not quiet quitting, and we're not smart working, and we're not doing a 4-day or 3-day work week. We're working at least 6 hours a day. And I know it's tiring, but it's better than working in the field. It's better than cleaning the streets. It's better than building the roads. It's better than building so many things. So I'd rather just do that. My father used to sell newspapers, and my grandfather used to sell blocks of hay. So if I can sit in an office for 12 hours a day in an air-conditioned office and just engage with the computer and have meetings and shake hands and watch presentations and present, I can do it for 12, 15 hours every single day. That's the mentality. That's the mentality I have. That's the mentality I take to Turkey. That's the mentality I took to Oxford. That's the mentality I bring here. If I go to my office at 8 or 9 in the morning, I'm there for 12 hours. 12 hours is easy. So if I'm there at 8, I'm there till 8 in the evening. It's normal. And everybody else has gone home by 4, by 5. It's just normal. Now, you may think that quality of life and work-life balance and, everything has to be smooth and peaceful. For this 3 billion in the world, let's say 90% of the 3 billion, maybe there's 10% who can afford not to work that hard. They're not thinking of life in terms of, I want to have at least 3 months off and I want to travel and I want to see the world and there's more to life than just work. For them, there isn't. For most of the world, there isn't. And I think that's the mentality my mum was trying to put in us. And it worked. Because if you ask me what I enjoy doing, so I'll tell you what, I love watching movies and I always enjoy good food and I love tennis and I have political ambitions to do it. But for me, work is central in life. Paid or unpaid, hopefully paid mostly. But even if it is unpaid, for example, if I'm working around the house, that's unpaid labor. And that's not really work, that's more duty. If I'm fixing stuff or building stuff or cleaning stuff, that's duty. This is my house. It's my duty to make it livable. So it's not really a job. I enjoy that the most. That's where life is for me. Life isn't, oh, I'm just laying on a couch or I'm just laying on a sunbed and just for hours and hours and hours, for days and days and days. That isn't where life is. Life is when you're adding value constantly, when you're producing, when you're creating. Um, so I think that's the lesson she was trying to teach us because the English language, they create words all the time and they continue to occupy the short term attention span of their public. And then people living in South Asia or China would try to say, oh, look, they're doing it. And they try to bring on that model. And it rarely works. I worked in an architecture office in Pakistan. I worked on a construction site. I've worked in a governmental authority, like the governmental authority for infrastructure and for construction and for urban policy. I've worked in all those sectors. Um, you can't you can't pull a 4 day work week. You can't go home in the middle of the afternoon and just rest and relax. Well, you certainly can, but they won't pay you anything then. If that's a risk you want to take, and you can't demand, hey, I deserve to be paid X amount of money. No, you haven't added value. The market determines your value. So I think my mum was teaching us that in that regard, that smart work or quiet quitting or all these terms are facts. They come and they go. They're always transient. They don't mean anything. The man who invented the wheelbarrow or the wheel did so by repetitive, iterative attempts and pushing and pushing and pushing, and it iteratively develops. That's hard work, which eventually evolves into a smart work model. It's an efficiency model. But how people use the term smart work today is avoiding hard work. They're like, I'd rather not do that. I'd rather just do this. No, it evolves into smart work, but you have to start. That's like starting a car. The first gear is always harder, and the final gears, it starts moving smoothly. That's how it works. You can't expect things to be made easy for you. If you want an easy life, then go and live somewhere else where things are provided to you, or live in another time. The world is a beautiful place, and I think competition and drive and ambition are one of the greatest parts of the human being. You have to go through with it. You have to follow that dream, that ambition, that drive. You have to go with it. That's what you're made for. Otherwise, what are you going to do? How many trips can you take? How much can you actually enjoy yourself? You have to get down to work. That's actually what I believe, and that's actually what I tell all the undergrads and grads and PhDs and policy advisors and business advisors and CEOs or whoever. You have to push. That's what the purpose of life is. The purpose of life isn't just to enjoy yourself and you start a company and you feel good and you make money and you go on a yacht. No, the purpose of life is to create and to push and to go through that process of iterative evolution. So the man who created wheel then started fire and then learned how to build and how to construct. Did so through trial and error. Edison, Tesla, Einstein, Newton, every scientific discovery, they call it discovery. But the amount of work that goes into digging internally and externally to arrive at the discovery is insane. You know this. So I still hold to my mother's model. I never try to think of, oh, I'm going to work smart or I'm going to find shortcuts. No, I'm going to get started with the work. And in the rhythm, I might start saying, do you know what? Maybe that's something I can automate. And that's something I can delegate. And that's something I can thematically ascribe. And that's something I might be able to do later. And I feel tired every 15 minutes or half hour or 1 hour. Every 1 hour, I can do a 10-minute break. And while in the pattern, in the rhythm, I can start adding these amendments, which are still based on the efficiency model. How people use smart work today is a lazy model. And what I'm saying is you need to use it as an efficiency model. And efficiency is nothing if there isn't hard work at the center. The rhythm has to be consistent and running, and then smart work can adjust it and slightly make it more efficient because it evolves iteratively. That's the model. So, if those terms were part of our common parlance in the 90s, I'm sure my mother would have said, "Oh, the smart work is useless. Continue to work hard, and eventually you'll be working smart." But because that term wasn't part of the lexicon at the time, she didn't use the term, but essentially it meant this. So I give the same advice to everyone, and I'll continue to give the same advice. You can't prove me wrong on this, and even if you do, you'll be competitively outcompeted. You'd be competitively replaced. There are countries in the east part of the world, billions and billions of people who are doing exactly what I'm telling people here in Canada and England and America to do, and they're outcompeting you in business and politics and education and delivery everywhere. I mean, the immigrants who come to the US, Indian Americans and Asian Americans, which means East Asia, the highest grossing demographic in the US. How come? Well, because they're working. Their skin, if there were systemic racism, it's still not strong enough to stop these people from rising. It's not strong enough to stop people like me from rising. Thank God. But we're working hard all the time. We're grinding. So I tell everyone under the age of 30 that 12-hour work days have to be the norm, and 16-hour work days if you can stretch it. So if you start at 8 o'clock in the morning, stay in the office till at least 8, if not till midnight. That's been my advice to somebody who's starting anew. And I know people rally against it and they say it doesn't work. It works. It works better than every other model that you've tried to come up with, because this is a model that has been tried and tested through centuries, through millennia, through hundreds, thousands of years of human evolution. So the model works. I know it doesn't feel good because maybe you're lazy or maybe you have a different mentality or philosophy or sensibility, but the model works. And whoever I've told that to, if they end up following it, within a year, they're showing me results and they're showing me revelations about themselves. They say, "Ali, or sir, I didn't know I could work this much. I just People would leave at 5 and I just force myself to stay at the office." And then the next step of this is, if your office opens early, like a lot of them do in London, you're at the office at 7 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes 6:30. You're at the office early morning because you avoid the traffic and you avoid the tube congestion. You avoid all of them. You're at the office at 6:30, and you leave the office at 6:30, which means you're home by 7:38. You eat, or you go out with your wife, your husband, your family, or your friends. You're back home at around 10:11. You're asleep. You're awake early. Back in the office. It's a perfect efficiency model. And when you're under 30, you're in your 20s. It's required from the market that you put in more than the 50-year-old who's been around for 20, 25 years. But also you have the energy to do so. So do it. And if you're not working for a company, if you're working on your own startup, then do the same. Set time limits and just work and work and work. And within 5 years or something, you'll start seeing results which you couldn't have seen otherwise. And then you'll be finding ways to making it smarter in any case. So do that rather than follow fads that are not going to be here in a few years. So I tied this back to my mum's advice because that has kept me away from such fads that come into fashion and then disappear. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for joining me for another lesson from my mother.